Okay, I'm going to break this drawing down into steps that are way easier to follow than you might imagine so that you can have a go, create this and amaze yourself. Okay, so as explained in the intro, I'm going to break this down into steps so that you learn the painting process and techniques as well as about the app that I'm using, Procreate. But that isn't to say you couldn't use a different app on a different tablet and still follow along. Having said that, within the app Procreate, I'm using their default A4 canvas, which is 297 by 210 millimeters at 300 dpi. And the color profile, again, is one of their defaults. It's the sRGB code, the one that ends in 2.1. On the list here, within Procreate. In terms of the brushes, I'm only going to be using the default brushes within Procreate, so you don't need to download anything. And I will let you know what brushes I'm using and how I'm using them when we get to the point in the tutorial. In terms of the colors, I've already pre-selected a color palette. Each of the colors, if you go to this value section, has what we call a hexadecimal code associated with it. And I've listed all of the codes down in the video description, so you can either copy and paste them one at a time into this box and press enter. The color appears up here and then you can tap it together yourself, or alternatively next to the codes is a link that takes you to my Patreon page where you can download the colour file for free to save you some time. And Patreon is also the place that you can support this channel, gain access to exclusive content such as extended versions of most of these tutorials. I'd like to say a massive thank you to those people who do support me over at Patreon. It really does make a huge difference, so thank you so much. And if you'd like to support but Patreon really isn't your thing, then subscribing, giving the video a thumbs up, and maybe even leaving me a comment. All of these things really help out the channel as well. And with all of that said and done, we're going to get started. So the first thing, I'm going to rotate the canvas to the portrait orientation. I'm going to go to my colours. I'm going to use the first colour on the top row. I'm going to drag from the colour circle into the canvas, release, and it should flood fill. Now please be aware that some of the colours will look a little bit different on my screen compared to maybe your screen. My camera will slightly change it, but don't worry, as long as you've got the codes or the download, you are using the right colours. I'm going to go to my layers. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 2, and I'm going to go to the second colour on the top row. I'm going to go to my brushes, airbrushing, soft brush. I'm going to put the size of the brush up. It's about 70% and 100% opacity, and then straight through the middle. We'll do a band of this colour. Still on layer 2, I'm going to go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur. I'm going to blur that in to about 15% and deselect. I'm going to go to my layers and create a new layer, layer 3, and I'm going to go to the third colour on the top row. Still with a soft brush with an airbrushing, but I am going to turn it down significantly to about 30%, still 100% opacity, and then straight through the middle again. Band of this, adjustments, Gaussian blur, and we'll blur that in about 80%, but I do want it to be stronger, so I'm simply going to take that layer, slide, duplicate it, and you can see it ramps it up. I don't want too many layers though, so the top version I'll tap and merge it down, so it just condenses it back to one layer. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 4, and I'll go to the fourth colour, same brush, soft brush, but we'll turn it down even further to about 10%, still 100% opacity, and we're just going to go a little bit lower than halfway. Do a band of this, it doesn't matter if it's not a straight line particularly. Adjustments, Gaussian blur, and again we're going to blur it in, this time to about 50%, deselect, and I'm going to do the same thing again with that layer. I'm going to slide and duplicate it, and again it just ramps it up. Tap on the top version, merge down. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 5, and I'm going to go to the fifth colour on the top row. Still a soft brush, but I'm going to turn it down significantly now. So I'll put it down to 2% size and 100% opacity, and then I'm going to choose the horizon line. I don't want it to be completely in the centre, I want it a bit lower down. I'm going to use both hands, I'm going to choose the point, I'm going to draw a line across, hold it until it snaps, but then you have to try and figure out where the horizontal point is, which is a bit tricky. So with the other hand, one finger down, and it just snaps it to a perfect point. Now we want it a bit underneath the halfway, and if it isn't quite there yet, you can go to the transform. Doesn't matter what else you set it on. Freeform's good actually. Move it down, and that looks about right to me. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 6. I'm going to go to the clouds brush within elements. I'm going to skip these colours for now, I will come back to them. I'm going to use these ones first. So I'm going to use the 7th colour on the middle row. I'm going to go 10% size, maybe to begin with about 50% strength. I'm just going to circle in some clouds, a few taps around the edges here and there. We'll start in the upper area for some bigger shapes. Left and right. We'll have a few that are encroaching towards the middle, but not much. Higher up, maybe turn it down a little bit from 10, about 6 maybe. Let's try that. Can be a bit more controlled as we come down towards the horizon. Just circular movements. It's already got a little bit of kind of natural cloud texture, naturally enough. That is the name of the brush, but it doesn't give you the forms, so we are blocking it in, applying it where we want the exact shapes and textures to be. Go over it a few times here and there, just to really firm up some of the shapes. We don't want it all to be completely wispy, we definitely want some blockier forms here and there. We'll turn it down a little bit more, maybe 4%. And as we come down a little bit further, we're going to get smaller shapes. The shapes in the upper band represent clouds that's closer to us, and then the further it gets away from us, the nearer the horizon line it's going to be. It's quite a simple kind of rule, really. Anything that's near that horizon line represents clouds or features that are just further away. And as clouds get further away, they tend to form more recognizable kind of bands of cloud. Not to say we won't do any circular motions, because we will, but it's going to cluster together in sweeps of cloud that just go across the whole of that area. So we can bring it across. And this colour isn't the right colour necessarily for all of these areas, but that's fine. We have ways of dealing with that. And cloud shapes can be a bit tricky. You don't need to copy the shapes exactly as I'm showing you, and it would be very difficult to do so anyway. But just aim for something that's similar. Apply it in kind of circular movements. Allow some little breakaway random sections in the sky as well. Little tufts that isolated on their own. Little gaps are fine as well. There really isn't a right and wrong. I guess there are some things that look more natural than others, and that's our only judge really, isn't it? So don't worry too much if it isn't looking quite right initially in these early stages. You can see that mine isn't really either yet. We'll just turn the size of that brush down. 2% maybe. Some smaller shapes. Just make them a bit clearer. Go across here, just make some of these little bands of cloud a little bit clearer as well. That'll do. We're going to go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and we're actually going to soften this in because you can see some of the texture is a little bit too crispy. Whereas if you slide that Gaussian blur across, only to about 3%, and it just softens, makes it a little bit better. Deselect. We'll go to that layer, tap on it, and put on the alpha lock. A little checkerboard appears. We'll switch maybe back to the airbrushing soft brush. We'll go for the next colour along, the 8th colour, maybe about 7% size, and we don't want to go too strong on the opacity, so maybe about 20%. And then we can start coming in here and we can just apply some of this in the upper area, just to cool it down a bit, soften the harsh kind of really dark maroon colour into just some cooler colours. Makes a bit more sense with the upper area, the cool colours up there. Soften them in a little bit, not too much of that, and we'll go straight to the 10th colour. And then at the bottom we're going to be using this more for this bottom area, and it will just soften it in with the orange colour. We'll just kind of blend it through, soften it as it gets close to that horizon line. That's definitely going to help us. Now I'm going to go and turn off the alpha lock, stay with the 10th colour on the middle row, still with a soft brush, turn it down 5%, size maybe 10%, strength, opacity. And then I'm just going to go over this a few times at the bottom just to kind of blend that through a bit more, just to blend it down. So I'm going to go back underneath, so go to layer 5 and create a new layer. So layer 7 is underneath layer 6. I'm going to go to the first colour on the middle row, and I'm going to go and use the soft brush within airbrushing. I'm going to put the brush size to about 50%, and we'll start off pretty subtle, so we'll go to 15%. Opacity, and the sun's going to be kind of roughly here, so we can do a few taps of this. We'll just bring in that yellow glow through the whole area. Perhaps we'll turn it up a little bit more. In fact, let's go to 70. 3 taps. We'll go to the second colour. We definitely have to turn it back down again. go to about 40%, and we'll still stay at the low opacity of 15%. The sun, I'm going to put kind of about here. So 1, 2, 3, perhaps. Third colour, turn it down, maybe 25%. 1, 2, and then I'm going to go to my layers, create a new layer, layer 8. I'm going to go to the 5th colour. I'm going to stay with the airbrushing, but I'm going to go to the medium hard brush. I'm going to put it up to about 7% size and 100% opacity, and then we're going to put the sun in here, tap it a few times. Then we can go to the adjustments, the bloom, we can slide it across and it just ramps it up for us. Very helpful. And then deselect. So I've just done the slider all the way across there. Perhaps we'll go back to layer 7 and we'll go backwards a colour as well. We'll go to the 4th colour and we'll go back to the soft brush. We'll put it at maybe 15% size, 15% strength. 5 taps of that. And it still maybe needs to be a bit more yellow, so we'll try the 3rd colour again. 4 taps. And that seems to be getting closer to the kind of colour scheme that it should be. Now looking at it, and this is one of the advantages of digital, is that I think the sun could do with being a bit bigger, so I'm going to go back to layer 8, transform, put it on uniform, and we can just drag it from the corner of the box, make it a bit bigger, I think about there. I think I'm happy with that size overall. Back to layer 6, I'm going to create a new layer above it, layer 9, I'm going to tap on that new layer and put on the clipping mask, which links it to layer 6, but it is a separate layer, which means we can go in with a different colour, like this, and I'll just show you with a more obvious example, and we can add that colour, but it only allows us to add it in areas that correlate to the layer underneath, but it is actually on a separate layer. So we don't want those lines, tap and clear, go to the 1st colour, on the middle row again, maybe about 8% size, and I want to turn it down to about 20% strength. So I want to soften this area of this cloud a little bit. The sun is obviously going to bleach it out. We're not going to get any of those really dark colours anymore. It doesn't make much sense, so just soften it a little bit. Likewise, these little bits of clouds as they get closer to the sun. Doesn't make sense if they're too dark. So just soften them out, make them more subject to the environment. Now sometimes when you're doing large areas of just subtle transitions, you'll notice little bands may start to appear. Easy to identify the layer, it's layer 7, tap on it, and we can always go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, slide that across, blur that in, and most of the bands disappear as you can see. Okay, we're going to go to layer 9 and create a new layer above. I'm going to tap on the N and scroll down to the Add, Blend Mode. I'm going to go in with the soft brush with an airbrushing, and I'm going to go to the 2nd colour on the middle row. I'm going to have it down at 1% size, 10% strength, and rather than using a textured brush, we're going to create the sensor texture ourselves. I'm just going to do little taps where we want the kind of textured edge to be. So little taps and little dots, and then when you zoom out, it has a kind of textured look to it. So we're just going to obviously have the sun creating a little highlight along the edge of our shapes. And if you do it in a tapped application, then it stops it being too blocky. If you do lines that go around, obviously it looks a bit too plastic, a bit too fake, a bit abrupt. Whereas if you tap it in, then it has a more gradual, more textured look. And the tapping itself might be a little bit irritating, so I apologise for that, but I think it does help. It means that if you go wrong and you want to do the 2-finger backwards, well, you're going to have a lot of little taps, and so you're only going to be able to delete or undo so much, so just be mindful. We are on a separate layer, so if it goes badly wrong and you need to go backwards, then you can always just clear the layer and do it that way. So I'm just tapping in and around these clouds, and it has a more natural look. So just tapping in and around the edges where you think, well, the sun is going to immediately catch that edge. Easy enough to imagine the sun rays going up to here, for example. Therefore, it needs a little nibbled edge or highlights just catching it there. It's not to say you can't do sweeps and lines in places, but just be careful with it. Don't all have to be tiny dots. You can do longer sweeps of gestures, but move around the canvas. If you want to do almost like a neat line that goes around in places, well, you can do it, but just be mindful that you don't want to do it too much. Now I want these strong highlights to impact the cloud, the edges. At various points it can go all the way up to the top. Naturally enough, it's going to be a little bit less, But you also need to bear in mind that the sun isn't actually there. If it were actually there and close to the clouds, as in not, millions of miles away, if it was actually a ball that was floating in the sky more locally, then it would only really impact here. But because it's so far in the distance, the sun rays would also perhaps just catch the light on some of these opposing edges in places too. A little less so. You can't neglect to put it in some upper areas as well. And then as we come down into this lower area, we just need to be a bit more subtle, press more lightly, less of it. We have a few breaks and suggestions of texture just coming down into this lower area. Just like we did the general shapes, it can be more streaks, bands that cut across longer shapes down here. But I'm pressing lightly, very lightly in fact. We're already at a low percentage, but I'm pressing very lightly as well. And then back in, combinations of application really. We've also got the richer colours that we could use. We've got a colour down here that might be useful, the 8th colour. It's got a slightly warmer hue to it. Okay. Have a few breakaway little sections that is just the light colour on its own. Your cloud shapes are going to be unique. They're not going to be exactly the same as mine. Even if you try to make them exactly the same, they're going to be subtly different. So you just need to see. Zoom out, keep checking, is it too much? There's nothing stopping us going back later and adding more. What we'll do is go in with the Elements Clouds brush. So where are we? Elements Clouds. Use this same colour, but I'm going to turn it really down to only 5%, maybe 6% strength. And then just within some of these shapes, in fact a little bit stronger than that, back up to the 10%. We're not seeing it at all there, are we? We don't want these other areas to be completely devoid of feature, so we can add a little bit of texture into some of these areas too, just to bring them back to life again, just in the middle areas. Okay, I'm going to leave the clouds for now. We may well come back to them and refine further, but it's a good starting point. So we're going to take all of those layers by going to the wrench, add, copy canvas, and paste. It's put it at the top layer, but we don't want the whole image. We only want a section. So I'm going to go to the selection tool, put it on rectangle, zoom in so we can just select it from here, and then we're going to drag across that horizon line and down, grab all of that. Then to the layer, tap on it and clear, and you can see it's just reduced the amount of information. Then we can go to the transform, flip it vertically and drag it down. Marry it up with that horizon line and deselect. I mean, it's kind of beautiful in itself, but we don't want to leave it as a crystal clear water. It's going to be far from that, in fact. But it's good as a starting point. It gets us past that general application of colour. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the airbrushing soft brush. I'm going to go to the 3rd colour on the top row, 10% size roughly. Let's put it at 40% strength. And let's just go in there and let's just blot out that sun. I want it to be there, but I want to be able to control where that light goes. Then I'm going to go to the adjustments, the motion blur, and we're going to carefully slide it to the side. So it kind of obliterates it really. So about 60% looks good. Deselect, transform, freeform, just pull it at the edges so that it doesn't retreat away from the edge. That will do. And it's just giving us some of those colours, a general sense, but it's much, much more hazy. And once we've done that, I'm going to go to the layer, tap on it and put on the alpha lock, which means we're not going to be able to push it around to other areas because I'm going to go to the smudge, then go to artistic, the leatherwood. Now I've changed the spacing, so I'll go to the stroke path and spacing. I'm going to put it to maybe 45%. By default, it will have been at 27, which is too close together. I want to space it apart, put it about 45 and done. So we're on smudge, 2% size, maybe about 70% strength. And we're just going to start doing horizontal sweeps, although I've moved it just so I can do these long gestures more easily. And we just want to try and sweep it across. In fact, we could go even smaller for the distance. Let's turn it down to the 1%. Some really fine textures that are starting to build in right at the very beginning of this process. It's not going to be the finished look, but it just sets the foundation of texture to move forward with. And we could perhaps move it up again into the 2% as we come down into this area. A few sweeps of this, up, higher, 3%. If we come down to this area, we can drag it from the dark areas into the middle, just like we can have some of the light colours that are being pushed around as well. And you can see it just brings this sense of ripples almost, not quite, but it stops it being so flat looking. Grab some of those dark colours, run them through both directions, and then just generally all the way across. Just drag from either of those dark shapes and then cross. As we come down here, let's just generally sweep it all in. And that's just giving us a bit more texture to play with. Stops it looking too flat. I think as soon as your imagination can start to look at something and start almost heading in the direction of interpreting it as ripples and texture in water, then you're getting somewhere along the way on that process. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to tap and put on the clipping mask. So again, it links it to this layer. We'll stay with the leatherwood brush. I'm actually going to increase the spacing from 45 maybe up to about 60%. Click done. I'm going to go in with the 6 colour on the top row, 2% size, maybe 50% strength, and just a little bit down from the horizon. And start adding some of this texture in. Then just a little bit up, higher on the 2% as we come a bit lower down. We don't want it completely consistent. We're okay to have some bits that are a bit darker, gaps, up to 3%. Bands start to appear, that's all well and good for our purposes, 4%. And that will do initially. Then I'm going to go to the adjustments, the motion blur, and to the side we're going to slide it to about 30%. Whoops, try it again, start again, to the side, and try to do it to the side as much as possible, about 30%. That's starting to work a little bit. We'll go to that layer, tap on it and put on the alpha lock. We'll go along to the 7th colour and we'll change brush to the airbrushing soft brush. 10% size will do. The same settings we had previously, 40% opacity will do, and we'll just start to bring some of this darker colour in, lower down. We don't want the dark colour up near the top. Want it to get gradually darker as it gets closer to us. Try darker colour again, let's go for the 8th colour. And it just starts to bring in the sense of perspective of tone. Things will get darker the closer they get. So I'm going to create a new layer, layer 13. I'm going to go in with the inking, the dry ink brush, go in with the dark colour. We'll go for the 10th colour on the top row. We'll put it maybe at 20% size, 30% strength, and we're going to use it to bring in some extra kind of sweeps across. Areas like this, we want to start creating some darker shapes that cut across this centre area. And they can be broken, they'd be staggered. Doesn't want to necessarily collect as one shape whenever it appears. It could be a collection, but give the impression when you zoom out of a kind of band. And we're just carefully moving it around different areas, creating a series of more prominent bands that just cut through. And they don't need to be straight lines, they can have sweeps to them. Swirls in the water. Maybe you're going to get folds and little waves in the water, you're going to get more of these dark colours that just turn away from the sun. So therefore you've got this kind of shadow part of the wave, but we definitely want some of these little things to be encroaching further back into the water as well. Just press more lightly for our dashes to get further back. Whole collection of them. Maybe a big collection of these shapes in this area. Okay, I'm going to create a new layer, layer 14. Stay with the same brush, I'm going to go to the 3rd colour on the bottom row, and then, well, maybe we can have some cool colours that come in and mix with this. We've got a generally cool kind of sky at the top, which means that if we were to pan around and look at the different areas on the landscape, there's going to be more of this colour, which means there would be more of this as an ambient light in the environment. So we certainly should expect to see it effect areas on the water as well. It will reflect back light from all different places, not just the obvious sun. Now we can have a top area perhaps that's just folding in. I'm not going to make the water terribly kind of frothy, just keeping it relatively calm. Bring some of these colours through. Perhaps turn it up a little bit, 40%. Bring some of these colours through. Turn up even more, 60%. Want some of these colours in the foreground. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start bringing the sunlight through, and then we'll deal with some of the other waves as necessary, but we definitely want that strong light coming through next. So we'll go to our layers and create a new layer, layer 15, tap on the N, scroll down to the Add Blend mode. I'm going to go for the fourth colour on the middle row, and we're going to go to the Luminance Light Pen. I'm going to put it maybe about 15% size, and not full opacity at all, maybe about 40%. And then, well, we're going to have a channel of light that comes down from the sun. So it starts all the way back here. I'm going to do little dashes, the waves just grab that light and really reflect it back. And this is the drama that's going to be introduced to the scene. Don't worry too much about this line up here. If we need to tidy it up later, we can do, but I'll just go in there and maybe just do that line initially. If it gets a little untidy, well, you can always go in there and just with the eraser and tidy it up. It's not really a big deal. Obviously, we want more of this glow in the center. Bring it down. You need to keep zooming out because you could easily end up steering it off to one side. And as it gets towards those little edges, you get a little breakaway. Bits of the light will come further down. And I suppose the point of this is that actually then we're going to start introducing breaks as well. This is going to be a little bit time consuming. You can do lots of individual little taps. But this is one of the most interesting effects of the whole image, so it's worth spending the time just to really get it looking good. You can already see the effect coming through, and then it's going to start impacting the top and some of the little swells in the water. And as it comes further down, well, you can start introducing breaks, less so up here. But as you come further down, you're going to notice more obvious kind of breaks in that glow, bands that cut through. Again, this is going to be a little bit time consuming, but it's worth it. It's a very satisfying kind of effect and look. Where the magic of the scene really happens. So spend the time, keep zooming in and out. Lots of sideways dashes. And if you feel like you've not been able to do that very well and look a bit wonky at the end, you can always go to the motion blur and slightly push it to the side, and it might just soften them in. But we're not doing that yet. We're going to continue adding them first. So we'll carry on adding our little dashes. Having gaps and breaks, bands that cut across can be really effective too. We also want more of a concentration in the center, makes sense. Zoom out, check that it's looking right. If also it went a bit wrong, you could always go to the transform, put it on freeform, where you could hold that middle button at the bottom and you could redirect it if you needed to. So we don't need to do that, but just in case you do end up going a bit wonky with it and it doesn't look right, there are other ways to fix it. But we'll do our best to not need it. Might just get a little bit more dispersed as it comes closer to us. A few more little points of light that maybe just extend out at the edges. Again, a bit more concentration here at the top. Could also turn the size of the brush up, 30%. Again, as we come down in the foreground, just introduce a few more gaps. Doesn't need to be quite as consistent. We'll come back to that. I'm going to go backwards to the inserted image, which was underneath layer 12. I need to darken up some of these colours, so we're going to go in with the airbrushing soft brush. Go for maybe the 7th colour on the middle row. 15% size will do, 40% strength will do. And we just need to darken up. I want to really focus the light into the centre area. Maybe go for an even darker colour. Need to be a bit careful with it though, but we'll go for the 9th colour on the top. Maybe turn it down from 40% to 20. And then we can just darken up in this bottom area. Let's just really shut down some of that light. And make more of a dramatic contrast, which is quite nice. And I guess we have the 10th colour as well. We can really just add that at the bottom. That's bringing the whole image together quite nicely. I think looking at this, I think I want to change the quality of that somewhat. So we'll go to the transform, we'll go on the freeform. In fact, no, we won't. We'll go on the distort. It might be slightly easier. We'll pull it out, keep the horizontal line at the top. We're going to pull out these blue shapes, blue circles at the top. Again, it needs to be central, a bit wider at the top. Try again. Distort and just narrow it in a little bit at the bottom. Just making sure it corresponds with the ripples, and that works a bit better. Therefore we get a more even kind of distribution of the light. It's not too narrow at the top and too wide at the bottom. It looked a bit strange. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 16, tap on the N, put it on the add blend mode, soft brush within airbrushing, and I'm going to go for the 8th colour on the bottom row, 5% size, 10% strength. Well, I'm just going to introduce a glow that generally cuts down. Obviously we need to go over the bits where we have the light, but also over the shadow bits. We don't want them to look oddly interrupting of that glow. I'll also go for the 2nd colour on the middle row as well, make it even brighter. Back to layer 15, back in with the luminance light pen. We're just going to add a few more speckles in the water, so we'll do it with the 4th colour on the middle row. I think the way just to really pull this together in a really simple way is to use like a depth of field blur. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the wrench, copy canvas and paste. Now it's put it somewhere unusual. I just need to drag that and put it at the very top. I'm going to go to the selection, rectangle. I'm going to grab maybe this bottom section here, but then I'm also going to use the feather. Put the feather up to about 45. Adjustments, Gaussian blur, and slide that in. Maybe it's about 7%. And deselect the both. And you can see that's just really created a natural look to it. Now it has retreated it from the edges, so that's easily fixed. We'll go to the transform, freeform, just drag it from the side slightly, that way and that way, and there you go. And I think that just binds it all together in a really pleasing way. So if you've learned something, if you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and I shall see you back here soon for another tutorial. Bye for now.